think I'm going to start because otherwise I think we could be waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm going to start just by introducing myself and saying a little bit about me and introducing what this workshop's really about. So my name's Mark Head. I am a TSTA and I live in the southeast of England. And I'm one of the directors of the Link Centre, which is a training centre that's normally based just north of Brighton in the Sussex countryside, but for the last year has been based on Zoom, like so many places. I actually live in a place called Crowborough, which is a sort of sleepy Sussex country town. It's sort of halfway between London and Brighton. And I live with Leilani Mitchell, who's my partner, both business and life partner, and our lockdown puppy, Pickles, 5 chickens, a mother-in-law, and a granddaughter who we home educate. So, yeah, got quite a full life. So let me just say a little bit about what we're looking at today. So this workshop is really, it's about family mottos or sayings, if mottos doesn't translate well for anybody outside of the UK. So family mottos and sayings, constructivism, and script. So those are the sort of 3 ideas that we're going to be exploring, and I'm expecting this to be a fairly experiential workshop, but I'll say a little bit more about that once you've had a chance just to introduce yourself to somebody else. So the title of my workshop is There Are People That Stand in Doorways and There Are People That Don't. It was a saying that I heard often in my childhood, and yet I'm also aware it's quite an ambiguous saying. So what I'm going to do is just share the screen, and then I'm going to set you a little exercise. I'm sort of thinking before I do that, we'll probably break for about 20 minutes halfway through. Does that feel okay to people? I mean, I'm happy to split the break in 2 and do 1 every hour, but I'm thinking if we break about quarter past, sorry, in an hour and a quarter for about 20 minutes, and then we go to the end. Yeah, if anybody doesn't like that, please let me know. I mean, I'm happy for us to agree something different. So what I want you to do, let me share the screen first. Okay, so this is the title of the workshop. So what I'm going to do is set you up in breakout rooms in a minute. And obviously, if you do not want to go into a breakout room, you do not have to. I would, I don't know whether it's set up for you to go in automatically. If you are put in automatically, you can just leave. So bear with me. I've still got people coming in. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to put you in sort of 3s in breakout rooms. What I'd like you to do is introduce yourselves to one another. Hang on a second. Get that out of the way. Okay, so I'd like you to introduce yourself to one another. And what I'd like you to think about and discuss is, what does the title of this workshop mean to you? Okay, so that's what you're doing, just introductions. I'm going to give you 10 minutes in breakout rooms, and I'd like you to introduce yourselves to each other and just say, what does the title of this workshop mean to you? Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I'm wondering, I mean, we can either, if people are willing to, whether they're willing to either type in the chat or just say something about what do you think that family saying or motto means. I mean, what comes up for you when you hear those words? There are people that stand in doorways and there are people that don't. Now, what came up for you? What meaning do you make of that motto? Because that's what this workshop is going to be about. It's about the meanings we make. So Anchor's put belonging. Okay. Yeah, I guess you're talking about that there are some people that belong and some people don't. There was something about risk-taking versus protection for me. Yeah, Chris, yeah. Some people are, so that's going too quick. Eunice, you've just done too much too quickly. I know, Eunice. Some people are obstacles and some people aren't, John. Decision-making, beliefs, impulses, discounts, blockages, bystanding in that role, shadow side, how in group. God, there's a lot here, Eunice. In terms of attaching, do they stand in the doorway? Stuckness, bystander, collusion, or avoiding potential abuse. Bystanding, apprehension. It feels like it's about connection. You either come into the room or you don't. Safety, transition. So one of the things you're probably noticing as I read some of these different interpretations of that saying out is that actually there's not one interpretation that's necessarily correct here. Okay, you've all come at it from a slightly different angle. Some are closer to the meaning that was meant in my family of origin, and whereas others are quite different. A number of years ago, I was running a very similar workshop, and I had somebody from New Zealand in the workshop, and because we were face to face, we had people act out their family mottos, and he went and stood in the doorway and sort of started shaking and moving around, and he said, well, because that's the safest place to stand when you've got an earthquake. Okay, so he had a very different meaning from the one that I have. And interestingly, somebody did mention it. Really, in my family, it was that comment was about people's personal space and their awareness of the space they took up or the space they didn't. So it's like there are some people that are more aware of others, and then there are other people who aren't. And if I think about that in relation to my own script and my own background, my mother was a nurse, so very much focused on serving others. And the main male role model for me was a maternal uncle who was a teacher. So there was a very strong ethic that was about service. Hardly surprising I became a psychotherapist in the end, really. So you can see in terms of the influences that I had for developing my own script, you can see how the interpretation of that motto makes sense. And I would suggest that the interpretations that you've each made of that motto will in some way relate back to your own script. I just want to bring the share up again, and I can start moving around the screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on and I'm going to talk a little bit about constructivism. But before I do, I think I've just got a few things that I think we need to say in terms of our contract here. You know, some of you I do know, quite a lot of you I don't know. And what, with bearing that in mind, what I would say is I really invite people to take care of themselves as you go in this workshop, that you're respectful of what other people share with you, that, you know, you keep it confidential. And I am going to be inviting you to look at bits of your own script. So So I would invite you to be responsible for yourselves. Don't do things that where you feel that you don't feel comfortable or safe. So keep yourself safe and look after yourselves. It's not that I'm going to do any major really bad exercises that invite you to look at the real depths of script, but I'm aware that, as I say, I don't know you, I don't know your backgrounds. The other reason that I say that is constructivism for some can be quite a challenging subject. And the reason for that is it can really challenge our perceptions of how the world works. So for some people, they find that quite uncomfortable. So that's another reason why I'm inviting you just to take care of yourselves as we go in this workshop. Is there anything anybody needs to say or ask at this point before we move on? Either pop it in the chat or what time does the workshop end? 4:30, Jane. Anything else? Okay. All right. So I'm gonna move us on a little bit. And I'm just going to introduce constructivism, and I'm going to start by talking about key terms when we're thinking about constructivism in relation to the sort of work that we do as transactional analysts. So things that we may well be talking about more as we go through this workshop. The first is the idea of postmodernism. And what I'm meaning by postmodernism is the idea that there is no objective reality, but there is multiple realities. So I'll give you a little bit of background on that, just to give you some context. Back in the 19th century, there was a strong belief in terms of modernism. And what modernism was concerned with is this idea that actually there were some grand truths out there, and we just needed to work hard enough and become enlightened enough where we would have access to what these truths were. I mean, this is essentially the idea of what modernist thinking is. So when you read something and people are saying, well, this is the truth, that's modernist thinking. During the 20th century, there was a movement that developed both in the arts, but philosophically, and also it moved into sort of psychology and psychotherapy, of this idea that actually there isn't just one reality, there are many realities, that we all have different perspectives on reality, assuming there is an objective reality, and some people would deny that. Okay, so postmodernism is this position that there is no objective reality. There are multiple realities. And you can see this idea fits very well with TA ideas around script theory, in terms of we all have our own individual script. We all have our own individual frame of reference. Constructivism, it really takes the position that human beings are meaning-making animals, and that one of their primary drives is to make sense of their experience. Okay, so that we create meaning and generate what we call reality. Okay, so it's us as the individual that creates meaning. We're meaning making, and some would argue, I would probably include myself, that our meaning making capacity, our ability to make sense of things, is actually one of the reasons why we have evolved to be top of the food chain. Because it's like we can locate ourselves in time, we can think about our past, we can imagine our futures, okay? We can predict things based upon the meanings that we've made. Am I making sense to people so far? give me a nods or thumbs up. I can't see all of you, so you know, if anybody's sort of thinking, don't get this, then please let me know in some way, shape or form. Unmute yourself and ask or stay. The third thing that we talk about when we start thinking about this idea of constructivism in terms of script and psychotherapy is the whole concept of just letting somebody else in. The whole idea of narrative. And when we're talking about narrative, we're talking about stories. In particular, what we're talking about is the stories that we create for ourselves that help us understand the world and how the world works. Okay, and this again fits very much with the TA idea of script, the idea that we have a, you know, that we have a story, we have a life plan that helps locate us. Any questions on these key terms? I'm going to just open the chat room just so that I can see if anybody's got anything that they're putting in there, when I can find it, that is. Okay, anything, any questions or thoughts at this point? Either unmute or just pop something in the chat. Happy either way.
I just wanted to say...
You've muted yourself, Jane.
Mute, Mr. All right. I just wanted to say something. I think I really like everything that you're saying. And I think it's really important. There's a few important things for me. Is our reality, isn't it? How we see the world. Yeah. Considering our frame of reference. And I think that is something I'm noticing more and more with my clients. Yeah. And that's very much about their place in the world, given what they unconsciously know about their scripts, and how they tell their stories to us. You know, what they share, who comes into the room within those stories. So all this is really making sense to me. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Lovely. Anything else from anybody? Otherwise, I'm going to continue on. I just want to talk a little bit about the development of constructivist thinking. And just introduce you to certain people. These are the ones that are outside of the TA community, but I'll then talk a little bit about people within the TA community that have either directly talked about constructivism or have been highly influenced by constructivist thinking in terms of the development of their ideas. So the first person we're going to meet is a chap called Giambattista Vico, who was an Italian philosopher. And in 1725, he noticed that human beings make meaning and order out of their experiences by explaining new circumstances through the use of past experiences. Okay, so we make sense of things based upon templates from our past. And Vico is really seen as the sort of father of constructivist thinking. Other people have developed it since then, but you know, his was the original thinking around this. A chap that I don't know, some of you will probably recognize his name and some of you might even recognize his picture. Don't know if you've ever come across this chap, Jean Piaget. Those of you that have studied psychology will most likely have come across him. So Piaget's ideas were based around the construction of knowledge, how we construct knowledge. And Piaget's ideas, interestingly, have massively influenced the education system, certainly in the UK. or certainly historically they did. Basically, what Piaget talks about is two ways in which we construct knowledge. The first of these he called assimilation. From a TA perspective, the way I would talk about this is assimilation is fitting our new experiences into existing ways of thinking. So what we would be thinking of is, how do we make these things fit our frame of reference? So that's what assimilation is. The other way of constructing knowledge that Piaget talks about is accommodation. And what we're talking about here is how we might alter the way we think about things in order to accommodate new knowledge. So this is where our frame of reference can't really cope with the new knowledge and therefore has to be altered. Yeah, so so Piaget is very well understood in terms of the education system, because in a lot of the ways in which we educate both children and adults were based around his thinking. This chap here is a chap called Lev Vygotsky, and Lev Vygotsky, what he talked about is the idea of social constructivism. And social constructivism really emphasizes the importance of social relationships in us constructing our realities. So he said that knowledge and reality are created through social relationships and interaction. So if we're thinking from a social constructivist perspective, what we're talking about is the importance of the social experiences in our meaning making. It's like when we have other people around us, that really helps us in developing our capacity to make meaning. And this last chap that we've got on here is a chap called Umberto Maturana. And Maturana is what's known as a radical constructivist. And basically, people that are radical constructivist reject the idea entirely that there is an objective reality. So he refutes that. He was a biologist and a philosopher, Brazilian biologist and philosopher, and he did some experiments on frogs, interestingly, and I don't know how he managed to do this, actually, but what he managed to show is that what's registered in the brain of a frog is not what's received into the eyes of the frog, which is interesting, isn't it? It's like, so somehow there is a process that goes on that alters the direct perception of what we perceive. I will say a little bit more about his ideas, because one of the people in TA who's written about radical constructivism draws on Maturana's ideas. But one of the things that Maturana says, a quote from Maturana, is life is a purposeless drift in which we use language to assign meaning. I'm just going to leave that with you to mull over. So life is a purposeless drift in which we use language to assign meaning. So I don't like spending, well, Leilani would argue with me actually about this, but I don't generally like spending long time talking lots and lots without getting you to sort of think about some of the things that I've been saying. So what I've got is another little exercise for you. And I think I might leave you in your same groups. Is that okay with people, or would you prefer to be changed around? What would you like? Stay with the people you're with? All right, easy one way or the other. But I'm going to leave you in those groups for the time being. So what I want you to think about is this, in your groups. I'd like you to think of something that in the past would have been taken as fact, the truth, as a reality, as an objective reality that we now understand in a different way. So that's my yeah, hold on, I'm going to stop the share. So that's what I'm inviting you to look at in breakout rooms. Again, I'm just going to give you 10 minutes for this. Yeah. Okay, I wonder if people are willing, again, just to pop into the chat, maybe some of the things that you were talking about, is like some of the things that in past you would have taken as fact. And let's just see what comes up in the chat room, what different people have been talking about in your breakout rooms. Maybe you're talking about things in general, things way back in history, maybe even things within TA that we would have taken as a reality that now we would question more. But let's just see what people have got. I can see 1, 2 people typing.
We had a little bit of a discussion around. We had a discussion around about things around HIV/AIDS. You know, so you'd have things around. You know, you can catch it from toilet seats and things like that. And you know, I suppose the sort of all of the prejudices around that. We also have sort of sexuality. You know, there are no gay people. You know, sort of those kind of things that were not accepted before. In fact, to the point where it was illegal. You know, and you know, and that's obviously something that's completely different these days. Gender identity as well, I guess, is another example that we discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read out 1 or 2 of the things. I mean, I agree, Chris. I'm going to read out some of the things in the chat room. So, theory of relativity about time and space. I'm not going to get into that one, probably because I don't fully understand it. Smacking children or flat Earth. I think the flat Earth is a classic one, isn't it? I mean, it's like, you know, of course the Earth's flat. You stand on it, you look in, you know, you look in each direction and it looks flat, apart from the odd hill here and there. So why wouldn't you, until you've got more information, believe that that's reality? You know, animals don't experience emotion. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm going to take your word for it, Debbie, that they do. And certainly, as I say, when I think about that and I think about my puppy Pickles, actually Leilani will argue with that, it's her puppy really. But, you know, certainly I can see that my puppy can experience anxiety, you know, or be aggressive. Right. Special relativity of time. There is no such thing as a universal now. Cultural frames of reference and issues around semantics. When is a chair not a chair? Yep. The world is due to end on certain dates, of course. Yeah. World is flat. Women and academic ability. Corporal punishment. Yeah. Electric shock treatment for epilepsy. Geocentric system or heliocentric system. Jacopo, do you want to unmute yourself and say something about that? You're muted.
No, it's very basic. The Earth at the center, or of the sun at the center. Yeah. So that's the Copernican revolution. Yeah. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we can see that there are many things that actually, as you know, that set in time and context. And as time and context changes, our meanings may change. You you know, and that actually all of us will have our own unique meaning, you know, so we have our own reality, and that reality may not be what other, you know, the same reality as other people. I was thinking about, you know, when I was putting this together, and I was thinking about, you know, what in TA can we think of as at one time we probably took as a reality, and now we would think about differently. I was thinking about Burns' original conceptualization of ego states, for instance, where he basically said he strongly believed that we would find physical locations within the brain that would correlate to ego states. Now we know that you know, that actually that idea has not been supported with our understanding of neuroscience today. Alexis says, maybe we shouldn't call it reality. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't. I'm just going to check the time. So I think I'm just going to say a little bit about TA and constructivism. Because within TA, we've got quite a track record of people thinking in terms of constructivism and how it informs our theories. And I just want to sort of give you a little whistle-stop tour concerning certain people and what they've written about constructivism. If you want to dig into this in a bit more detail, these are some people that you may be interested in reading. Finita English and Bill Cornell, in a couple of TAJ articles written in 1988, both talk about the capacity for meaning making in us developing our script. If we think about the way that Byrne talked about script, there was certainly a flavor of it being imposed, and that we, you know, the job of us as, you know, as therapists is to help facilitate our clients throw off this overbearing script and become autonomous. Finita English actually argues that script, you know, is a framework for making sense of the world, and that actually we don't really want to get rid of, you know, we don't want to facilitate our clients in getting rid of their script, because if we did so, we would leave them with an existential crisis. They wouldn't have a way of understanding themselves in relation to other people. Alan and Alan have wrote a whole series of articles that I've just mentioned a couple here. And after the death of his wife, Barbara, Jim continued to write articles around constructivism and neuroscience as well. Alan says, Alan and Alan take a very social constructivist view. What they say of us is that we tend to see our lives in terms of our established stories. And a quote that Jim Allen made is, we speak ourselves into meaning. So it's through our dialogue with other people that we create our meaning, which is what Vygotsky effectively said. They see language as a tool that we use to fool ourselves into thinking we know what each other means. So, you know, when we're talking about things and when we're talking about different terms, you know, when other people are talking about those things, we believe we know what they're talking about, but they may be viewing things quite differently from us. And really, Alan and Alan see the job of therapy as being much about helping people create new narratives, creating new stories from which they can make sense of their lives. If you like something a bit challenging, you might want to have a look at Bruce Laurier's article 1995, and he looks at radical constructivism and TA. I said that I would mention, when I was talking about Maturana, Loria draws on Maturana's ideas. And basically, Maturana sees human beings as prisoners of a biological perceptual system. So based upon how we have evolved as animals, we have a system for perceiving our environment. Okay. But what that means is, because we only have the, well, let's take it for the moment, we'll talk about 5 senses, you know, of taste, smell, touch, sight, hearing. Okay, we can only perceive the world in a particular way. And if we had different senses, we would view it in a very different way. So for instance, sharks have the capacity to sense the electromagnetic field around shoals of fish. If you think like bats have the capacity, their hearing capacity is so good that they can use it as sonar effectively. Human beings can't generally do that, or certainly not as far as I'm aware. And we would perceive the world very differently if we had those sort of capacities. And, you know, what they, you know, I mentioned that quote from Maturana about life is a purposeless drift in which we use language to assign meaning. And what they go on to say is the drift of life just happens. We discover ourselves in the midst of our preferences and then construct an explanation as to why we believe they are happening. Now, interestingly, so we like to believe that we're nice, rational, logical beings, but actually, from a radical constructivist perspective, it's argued that we're not. We tend to rationalize a lot. So we do things and then we make up the reason why we've done it afterwards. And that is supported by neuroscience as well, by the way, where they've actually done studies where they looked at areas in the brain. They identified areas in the brain that sort of make yes/no decisions. And what they did is experiments for people to tell you when they were aware of when they made the decision. And what they found is that there's a delay between making the decision and being able to tell when we were aware of having made the decision. If that makes sense. Are you understanding what I'm meaning? So there's a delay between the two. We've already made the decision before we rationalize it. Couple of other people. Rezi Tosi, in the book on life scripts, really draws on this idea of narrative, and she sees script as lived and narrated. So we live our script out, but we also use it to talk to other people and when we refer to ourselves and others. So it's how we explain it to others, but we also live it. So it's lived and narrated. I hope that made sense. That makes sense? Thank you, Eunice. I saw your head nodding. So I'm going to take it. And also Tudor and Summers talk about constructivism is one of the main underpinnings of co-creative TA. It's quite interesting, really, because constructivism as a movement within TA has been included in the relational school. I think we can call it that now, which is interesting because really you're talking about an internal process of meaning making, whereas often so much of relational thinking is about the relationship between people. Yet it's more about holding a constructivist stance when relating to other people. I'll come back to that a bit later if you need more on that. I'm aware of the time, and I'm just thinking this will probably be a really good point for us to stop for a bit of a break. Are we ready to move on? Are we ready to restart? So you'll be pleased to know that for the first half, I've been doing most of the work, and for the second half, you're going to be doing most of the work. Well, that's only partially true, but I've got a number of exercises to really start illustrating some of what we've been talking about. And what we will do is we're going to look at a little bit at script now, and then we'll come sort of back to the whole idea of family sayings and mottos, and I'm going to invite you to explore some of your own together. So let me just share this. So I'm going to move into talking about constructivism and script. Okay, constructivism and script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen a number of statements about script. These have been taken from different TA authors over the years. So some of them go back to the early days of TA, whereas others are a little bit more current and something in between. My invitation to you is, as I put these up, so you're going to end up with 6 different statements. What I'm going to ask you to just notice is which of these 6 most resonates with you. And then what I'm going to do is put you into breakout rooms together. I'm going to change them around a bit. Just getting you looking at which statement most resonates and get you reflecting on what is that about? How come that resonates for you rather than something else? What might be in your own script that might mean that you're more drawn towards a particular statement, or more likely to reject a particular statement around script? Let me just put the statements up and then I'll check that everybody understands what you're going to be doing. So this is here's one statement of script. Script is seen as basic training in life. Or alternatively, what we've got is a life plan based on a decision made in childhood, reinforced by parents, justified by subsequent events, and culminating in a chosen alternative. I imagine that that's something that many of you will have heard of before. Another statement about script: a result of the cumulative failures in significant dependent relationships. Ooh. Alternatively, we could see it as a narrative construction that has the purpose of helping persons build their own identity, anticipating others' reactions, and giving purpose in life. The ongoing process of a self-defining and sometimes, that should say sometimes, by the way, well, I say it should, but that's only because I know what the original quote is. Sometimes self-limiting psychological construction of reality. And the final one we've got is an unconscious life plan. Now, it might be that there's more than one that you feel drawn to. That's okay, but I'm going to push you a bit and ask you, okay, so if you were really forced to make a decision between them, which would be the one that you would most go for? I'm going to stop. Actually, I'm not going to stop the share. I'm going to put the exercise up first. So ways of viewing script. So as I say, which of those previous statements about script most resonates with you and why? Can I just check, has everybody got one that really resonates with them? Have you managed to sort of scribble something down? Has anybody not? Please let me know. Unmute yourselves and shout, and I'll go back to them.
Can you just go back so I can take a screenshot, please, Mark?
Of course. There you go.
Could someone with a MacBook remind me how to do a screenshot? Because I can't remember how to do it.
I haven't got a MacBook, I'm sorry.
It's Command Shift and 3.
Command Shift 3. There we go. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to now stop the share and sort some breakout rooms out. So I want to see if anybody's willing to sort of share anything that came out of your discussions in terms of, you know, which of those statements you were most drawn to and what thoughts you had about that. Anybody willing to unmute themselves and pitch in? Or not?
I'll pitch in if you like. Hi.
Well done, Becky. Thanks.
We were talking about the different phrases, and the bottom one that jumped out to me, I had it on a screenshot, so I don't have it written down, but I think it's the burn definition.
Yeah.
And
life plan based in a decision made in childhood, that one.
Yes, yeah. And I was linking it to my own script of, I was pulled to that one initially. And I was thinking about my own script of, in some ways, that definition for me is like the big book, people tell you what it is, and that's how it is, and you don't question it. So, and that is very much my history. So I was thinking, okay, and then when we started looking at the other ones, the top right one, which was looking at the narrative, seemed a lot more present and kind of giving permission to be able to create something in their adult ego state rather than a historical either child or parent. So it was, for me, linking it to my script was quite insightful actually, of I wonder how clients would receive it depending on how you share it as well. And how, you know, different people in the group were drawn to different ones was really interesting. Yeah,
it is, isn't it? It's a, you know, how we will be drawn, and part of the, you know, what I was saying about we interpret things based upon our past experience. So we will use our script to interpret this, and that will give us a sense of what we feel most connected to and least connected to. And I think what you've said really illustrates that, isn't it? It's like, that's really familiar for me, that one. That resonates with my experience.
So I suppose for me, I'm wondering for the bottom right, the burn definition, and sorry if people haven't got it written down, I just can't remember which ones they were.
I can pop it up on the screen if you like. Hang on.
That might be easier.
That just would be easier, wouldn't it, really? There we go. If I pop them back up. Yeah.
So the bottom right one, I was thinking, okay, I see that as I'm in child when I read that. That is true to my child. And then I really like the top right one, and I think that's because that's more of an adult decision. It feels past and present. There's a real difference for me.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. Nice. Let's see if anybody else wants to say something about it.
I'd like to say something just on the back of what Becky said. I really love what you said, Becky, because I was thinking the same about the one that spoke to me was a result of the cumulative failures in significant dependent relationships. And I was thinking about the Byrne quote, which is, you know, I was trained very classically genetically, that's sort of almost like in my DNA. But I went to a place of thinking about the child, you know, the younger part of me, and they, you know, having more empathy for the child, with even the construction and the reasoning around the script. So I went more to being more of a, what I saw as more of an empathic understanding of the script, and I think that's what I like about your interpretation. It's depending on which ego state you're looking at. So that's what spoke to me as well.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Anyone else? Let's one more. Anybody else willing to sort of just say a little bit?
I can say something, Mark. It's Amy.
Yeah.
I rather surprised myself by what I chose, which was the ongoing process of the self-defining, sometimes self-limiting psychological construction of reality. And I questioned why. And I'd just come out of Paul's session on co-creative.
Yeah.
And there was a freedom to me of hearing that co-creative script is continually changing.
Yeah.
And as we were talking in our group, there was something about, you know, in my linear plan, you know, oh, right, okay, I've worked through this element of my script, that's done. And then bam, across it comes again, sidewinds me. But there's something in that ongoing process about, yes, maybe come back again, but there's maybe a different texture or feel to it. There's been a change. So yeah, really surprised myself because, you know, the good old Bernian life plan is the one that trips off the tongue, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and of course, part of us as transactional analysts, we will have some TA in our script. So if you think about it, you know, of course, you know, when people sort of say about that burn definition, you've probably heard that. I would imagine many of you in this workshop have heard that definition again and again and again and again. I've taught it many times, but I often like to counterbalance it with some alternatives these days, because I think it is quite deterministic. Whereas I think some of those other definitions offer a lot more freedom, a little bit like you were saying, Becky. I think that was a nice way of thinking about it. Is like from the adult, if we think about it from the adult, some of those other definitions are more useful.
And do you agree with me, Mark, about the ego states and being empathic to the child, even around her own life or his own life script?
I do. I suppose what I think is, I do actually. What I think, Jane, is I think the burn definition is quite a good one, because we can't get away from the fact that those early experiences will have had a significant impact on us. I don't think we can get away from that. And that's why the burn definition still holds pretty well. And I think there's more. And I think some of the other definitions, you know, as we grow and develop, they can encapsulate more than what Byrne had to say.
Thanks. Yeah, you know, thank you. You've expressed that very well, so thank you.
Okay, no problem. I just want to, who was somebody about to jump in?
I'm just going to say I like the one about the one that's very much based in the result of cumulative failures in significant dependent relationships, because that was something I wasn't even consciously aware of growing up. But thinking about it, how loss, how illness, all sorts of things had a real huge impact, and how that played out. And for me, it doesn't mean that feels it's enough, but it just felt like it hit something really important that I think a lot of other things just didn't really capture. That was so significant for me. Yeah. And I work with a lot of people who suffered trauma, especially developmental trauma. And I thought this is such an important part of understanding how script has such a massive impact on it in relationship to other people, significant people in our lives.
And what that highlights to me, Karen, and again, this sort of fits quite well with constructivist thinking, is dependent upon the context, different definitions of script might fit better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was thinking about, if you're working with people that are traumatized, I can really understand why you're drawn towards that definition of script. Yeah, because it's going to fit really well when we're thinking about people who've experienced childhood trauma, particularly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's lovely. It's a much warmer, more accessible one than the others. The others are a bit sort of rational and sort of slightly, they're less feelings orientated, because I'm obviously a very highly feelings orientated person. So I just this just sets it out beautifully for me.
Yeah. That by the way, that definition comes from Erskine.
Thank you.
Which may relate in some way. One of the definitions I didn't put up there that always makes me laugh a little bit was by a chap called Marty Groder. And I'm just going to paraphrase what he said, because I can't remember it exactly word for word, but he basically said, every day, each person has the opportunity to create the world anew. Unfortunately, they tend to do the same lousy, habit-ridden job every day.
Say it like it is. Don't mess about.
Absolutely. So it always makes me laugh, that one. And it's a very constructivist view of script. It's like, yeah, we do have that opportunity. We can look at things differently. And unfortunately, sometimes it's just easier just to slip back in our habitual ways of doing things. I'm going to move us on. Unless anybody's got anything else they want to say about script from our discussions. Marty Groder wrote a great book. Thank you, Alexis. Do you know what it was called? She's just checking.
I'm thinking I'll put it in the chat later.
Okay, thank you.
Something about winners.
Yeah.
Winners. It's about Loveland and living in Loveland. And yeah, I'll put it in later.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take us back. I'm going to take us full circle now. I'm going to come back to the beginning and where we started from. I was talking about family mottos or sayings, and I was talking about my family motto. And what I'm going to invite you to do is do a little bit of exploration around sayings or family mottos in your family. And we're going to do this from a constructivist perspective. We can think of family mottos as having an interplay between them and our script. So in one sense, they form part of our script. They will reinforce our script. The family motto I had, there are people that stand in doorways and people that don't. There was a big emphasis in my childhood on thinking about other people, looking at things from other people's perspectives, right? Not being too demanding of my own point of view, but trying to step aside and empathize and understand. And that, I would say, has formed part of my script, both for good and bad. In reality, I think there's some really good stuff in there. And sometimes it might mean that I will not ask for my needs to be met appropriately because the emphasis will be on others, on making sure that I accounted for others first. But obviously, as a psychotherapist, that's quite a useful script to have, if that makes sense to people. So it will form part of my script. However, at the same time, it will also be interpreted through my script. So in the same way as when I asked you at the beginning, what meaning you made of it, you would have interpreted those words through your own past experience. So let me share the screen again. So if we go back to the screen share, and we've done that exercise, and we'll go on. So family mottos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into small groups. Actually, I might leave you in the same small groups as long as there's at least 3 of you in each group. And what I would like you to think about is I'd like you to think about a family motto or saying that you can remember from your childhood. What I would like you to do when you go into the group is the following. I'd like you to read out your family motto. I do not want you to explain it. So very much as I did at the beginning. So the family motto is this. What I'd like the other group members to do is to say briefly what meaning they make of that. Then I'd like you to consider the following bits. I'd like you to say what it means to you, and just to bring us into the current day, I'd like you to think how this has helped or hindered you either in the current COVID situation or in life in general. Okay, so what you're going to do is get some different interpretations of your motto, but also I want you to consider how it's been useful or not. Let's just see if there's anything anybody wants to say after that exercise. Anything that came up for anybody in doing that exercise? Anybody want to say something?
I suppose one of the things I've noticed it before about these mottos is they're almost a handing of the responsibility to the child by the parent figure, where they go, we're going to give you these vague words and you figure out what to do with them. Here you go.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
But they're not well thought out, carefully crafted rules for living life. They're generalizations and you have to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's probably my script in there as well.
There probably is. I'll tell you what I was mindful of, Owen. I was thinking about a bit of my own script going back. Another saying that was often used in my family that others of you may have heard was, I want doesn't get. You know, and as I grew up, the sense I made of that, and this wasn't a logical, rational sense, it was more, you know, intuitive, was I can't have what I want. And, you know, it's probably what got me into therapy in the first place, in reality, is that sense. But I was thinking about that. It's like, you know, what my parents were saying is ask for things nicely. That's really what they were saying. But I want doesn't get was really quite unhelpful to me because of the way I made meaning of it. So interesting. Someone's put a comment in the chat room. So I find these mottos usually highly transgenerational. They're handed down, often mindlessly regurgitated. I agree. I'm sure that was said to me, etc. And Karen's got a new motto in later life: if your job's worth doing, it's worth doing it adequately. Absolutely. Anything else? Anything anybody else wants to say?
I just wanted to say that I kind of hadn't realised just how unconscious some of this stuff is. I hadn't heard for years the phrase "children should be seen and not heard,"
Yeah.
And I've always wondered where my sort of deep introversion came from, and I can't just join the dots there really. That, you know, when you hear that particularly as an only child, you hear children should be seen and not heard. How pointed that was at me. So yeah, that's joined a few dots for me.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Somebody else was talking as well.
I was going to say, I think for me, the family kind of motto was work hard, don't waste. And not only was it kind of the family, it was played out, it was demonstrated, it was modeled. So it was more than just the phrase that was bandied around. It was actually acted out. So it was really reinforced through behavior.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't actually think I can ever remember hearing the words being said, with the exception of that's wasteful, you know, but it was all, you know, even going back transgenerational, looking back, that was the behavior of the family. So you have to work hard and don't waste things you work for.
Yeah.
Ingrained through modeling, I think.
And I think that's so often the way. And I was thinking about that with my motto, the one the people that stand in doorways, you know, the people around me were all people that were in service in a way, you know. They were nurses, they were teachers, they were, you know, these were people that were looking out for other people in some way, shape or form. They weren't people who, you know, who were just looking out for themselves. They really weren't, you know. So it was like everything around me was modeled this is the way we do things. Yeah. I'm going to move us on a little bit. Okay. Tradition is peer pressure from dead people. Stefan. Nice. I like that. Okay. I'm going to move us on a little bit. I've got just a little bit more. I've got a few quotes from Jim Allen. Actually, not Jim Allen, Jim and Barbara Allen, from their article in 1995, which was called Narrative Theory, Redecision Therapy and Postmodernism. If you are interested in this as a subject, for me, there's some great gems in this article. Jim Allen, Allen and Allen write about script from a postmodern perspective. And one of the things they say is we don't have one story, although we may have a dominant one, and one that may not be in our best interest. And I think hearing some of the mottos, and when we reflect on some of our family sayings, we realise that sometimes these are not in our best interest. They're in the best interest of other people. You know, I'm thinking about you, Chris. You know, children should be seen and not heard. That's certainly not in the best interest of you as a child, is it? The things they go on to say, and I think this is, you know, this is very constructivist, what they go on to say about script. And I'm going to share the screen because I've got these as quotes on the screen. Is if I can get it working. Okay, so they say, we create our memories in the present and project them into the past. Our futures we imagine in the present and project into the future. If our past and our futures are projections from our present, however then, our script, our major story, the one with which we most identify, is also a projection. Then they say, if we conceptualize the script as created, reaffirmed and recreated in the present, then we can conceptualize it as potentially highly changeable over time. Now, interestingly, what I would say is, if anybody's reading that and thinking, not sure I understand that, really, what they're saying here has very much been supported by research in psychology and neuroscience, is that actually we don't have an accurate representation of our past. We can't. The way our brains work is we reactivate neural networks in our brains. And the reality is that those neural networks are open to change. And that's why eyewitness testimony is generally not accurate, because we don't store away memories in the idea of a filing cabinet. It's the reactivation of a neural network. And many people have that experience of when they're talking with their siblings about something that happened in their childhood, that, their sibling will turn around and say, no, that's not what happened. Or no, that didn't happen to you, that happened to me. So, and this is because this is the way our brains work. It's got, and there isn't, so we do not have access to an accurate view of the past. What's most important is that we have a narrative for understanding and a narrative for containing our experience. And the important thing is that narrative is plausible and believable. It is not that it has to be accurate. Worth remembering for those of you who are counsellors and psychotherapists, by the way, when clients are looking for an accurate representation of the past, it's not relevant in a way. What's relevant is that they believe it and they can attach to it. Sorry, I digress slightly. What was I going to say? Where have I got to? So, what I'd like you to think about, I'm going to pop you back in breakout rooms for 10 minutes. And I'd like you just to say, are you happy with your motto? Are you happy with your family saying? And if not, is there an alternative meaning that would be more helpful for you in the future? Either one that's been supplied by someone else or one that you could provide for yourself. And if not, maybe as Karen said, maybe you need to provide your own new motto. So I'm just going to give you the opportunity to consider this. Okay, anything anybody wants to say before I start sort of wrapping up, and then we can see if there are any more general questions or thoughts or comments. Okay.
Mark, I'm really sorry. I missed the name of, under the we create our memories in the present, and you did a quote. Who were you referring to, please?
Alan and Alan, 1995. It's a TAJ article, and I know you've got access to the TAJ unit, so you can look it up. Okay, I'm going to just, I think I'm pretty much at the end. Let's see. Alan, oh, there you are, Alan and Alan, 1995 units. Conclusion, feedback and questions. Yeah, I just wanted to say, we've been looking at constructivism. We've been looking at your family mottos. We've been looking at script today. I think it's useful to bear in mind that TA itself is really a narrative. It's not necessarily a reality. It's a narrative that many people have found useful, included those here. And yet, for me, I think it's careful not to hold too rigidly to TA as a reality, but rather recognise it as a language that we choose to use, and that it will have both its advantages and limitations. I said earlier that that constructivism is seen, you know, a constructivist approach is seen as one of the ways of working relationally, or has been included in relational literature. And I just wanted to come back to that. In her chapter in the book Relational Transactional Analysis, Heather Fowley talks about the underpinning principles of working relationally. And she says, I quote, "Certainty is neither necessary nor desirable." And I think really that's why constructivism fits within the relational school, is because actually it's that underpinning principle which is in itself a constructivist view, that certainty is neither necessary nor desirable. And on that note, I am going to stop and see if there are any general questions, comments, anything anybody'd like to say. Becky needs to leave a little early. Thanks. Okay, great. Anything? Amy, have you got your hand up? Go for it.
Yeah, you said something earlier when you were talking about Vygotsky.
Yeah.
About the importance of social experiences in our meaning making. And that really resonated with me around what's gone on for us in the pandemic. And how that social experience has been missing and the impact that that's had.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'll say something on that that's slightly oblique, Amy, but also I think very relevant. As a TA trainer, one of the things that I've become really aware of during the pandemic and working on Zoom, and Zooms generally work pretty well, but I think what's really been lost in the training is all of the conversations that go on in breaks and over lunch, and the sort of like the being collared in the hallway by somebody and asked a question, and I was sort of thinking it feels like we've lost some of the glue that holds everything together in a way, which is about those social interactions, and how we have those conversations that probably often when we're learning TA helps really embed a lot of the ideas and gives you a chance to chew on them and discuss them. And in a way, it doesn't happen so much in the training, if that makes sense. It's not, I'm just speaking to your observation, really. Anything else? Lost some of the glue. Thanks.
I found it interesting to think of a motto. One didn't kind of glaringly come out, and it's almost because they're quite subtle. And it wasn't till I'd heard a lot of other people's, and I was like, oh yeah. And I came up with one, but it's like they're quite entrenched.
Oh yeah.
And just, yeah, I didn't like to think of it as a motto actually, but it was, yeah, it's very interesting how entrenched they are, and then what the influence that they can have on your script. Yeah, thanks. It's a really good workshop. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I was thinking that, I don't tend to say, well, actually, Leilani will go, this isn't true. I don't tend to say there are people that stand in doorways and there are people that don't. I sometimes do. She's looking at me. But what I'm aware is how often I hear it in my head. How often, somebody will do something and I just think there are people that stand in doorways and there are people that don't. And I'm Leilani, stop laughing.
Even I've started saying it inside my head. But maybe our interpretations are slightly different.
Yeah, it's true. Okay. Gillian's got a new motto. Yeah, that's a good one, I think. Yeah. Sure. Take on. Oh, thank you. Okay. If there are no other, I'm reading the comments in the chat at the moment, but if there are no other questions or thoughts that people, want to, want to ask or state, then I'm going to wind us up a little bit early, give you a chance to make a cup of tea or something before. I imagine there must be some sort of closing thing, Leilani, isn't there?
Yeah, so the closing is at 4:40. It's in about 10 minutes time, 14 minutes time. But don't close before everyone gives you feedback, Mark.
Okay.
Looks like it's gone well.
I think it's gone well.
Looking at the feedback.
I've enjoyed it. The meaning I've made, it's gone well. I don't know what meaning other people have made of this workshop, but I am hearing, I'm seeing some things in the chat, which is great. I'm glad people generally, I'm saying generally, I think I'm glad people have enjoyed it. I'm glad it stimulated you. Whenever I do a workshop, that's one of the things that I always want to do really I'd like things to be stimulating and interesting and perhaps come at things from a slightly different angle. So it gets you chewing on stuff. And I'm glad that's happened today. So thank you for your engagement as well, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to speak because my keyboard's not working. I found it really engaging and useful to kind of unpick the conscious and unconscious mottos from family.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, great. Lovely.
Some nice feedback, Mark. Are you reading it?
I am reading it. I'm reading it.
I've also popped the links into website in the chat room, just in case anyone wants to sign up to the mailing list or access any of our stuff.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to say, Mark, that sometimes coming to conference or being on training, particularly during a year where a lot of us have done training online, sometimes it can feel quite elitist. Sometimes you find yourself in training where you maybe don't understand what's being discussed, or you feel that there are people that it can sometimes feel a bit gamey. And actually, I really appreciate the way that you've developed today's workshop in a way that means we all go to our place of what do we know, what do we bring? Because the thing about the motto is that none of you guys know my motto. I know my motto, and that gives me a standing that feels really comfortable to begin that journey of learning. And I think that I think I've had a lot to gain from all the workshops I've done this weekend, but I really appreciate how conscientious yours has been, because I think that's really enabled me to learn in a different way. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. So we're pretty much up to time, guys.